Let's discuss animals, politics, and the House of Representatives. They are all, as you will see, related. Here are the animals: tiger, crocodile, scorpion. Now, please stay with me. In another era and faced with another foe, in this case Nazi Germany, President Franklin Roosevelt said this: "No man can tame a tiger into a kitten by stroking it." Another luminary of that era, Winston Churchill, said this about appeasement: "An appeaser is one who feeds a crocodile, hoping it will eat him last." The point is that things that menace always menace. They will not be tamed or fed into submission. Republicans, beholding the ouster of Speaker Kevin McCarthy, said today that they could see this coming all the way back in January when McCarthy made concession after concession to hard-right members of his conference. Those concessions continued throughout his short reign as Speaker, on policy, on January 6th, on the impeachment inquiry of President Biden. McCarthy stroked the tiger and fed the crocodile. Now he's gone. Which brings us to the scorpion. Others are now vying to succeed McCarthy: Majority Leader Steve Scalise and Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan so far, and there could be more. All potential successors will become rivals and therefore metaphorically have to sting one another. Still, other Republicans will vie for vacancies they leave behind, generating other rivalries. When I suggested today to well-placed Republicans that many scorpions were now entering the same jar of intrigue and political ambition, none disagreed. Tiger, crocodile, scorpion. Welcome to the zoo. CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane joins us now. He is not a zoologist, but he covers Congress. Scott, catch us up on the doings of the day.
Yeah, let me extend the analogy. The zoo is closed indefinitely. Take your tickets and go back home. The lights are truly off inside the U.S. House chamber. The doors are truly locked, and they're locked indefinitely. Half of the U.S. Congress is paralyzed as we speak, Major, with no end date to that. There's every expectation there could be more people jumping into this race to succeed Kevin McCarthy, more than just Congressman Scalise, more than just Congressman Jordan. And there is no expectation from anybody inside that this thing's going to wrap up in 1 week. And the House will not function until there's a speaker. And this is all happening at such a distinctively tenuous moment as we're racing towards a shutdown deadline and as funding for Ukraine is very much in question. I brought this to one of the Republicans who supported Kevin McCarthy today, Mark Molinaro of New York. Take a listen to how he characterized it. Does this make a shutdown in November more likely?
Well, listen, this delay and this undermining certainly makes this a very challenging next 40 days. The ability of Congress, however, to come to an agreement can happen almost instantly if members on both sides of the aisle acknowledge reality. We have a bipartisan government. The solutions that we will deliver for the American people have to be bipartisan.
Meanwhile, one of Mr. Molinaro's fellow New York Republicans, Mike Lawler, has called to excommunicate Matt Gaetz from the House Republican Conference, wants him kicked out because Matt Gaetz led this successful charge to oust Kevin McCarthy. That's the level of acrimony we're facing midweek here in the U.S. House.
And Scott, you were good enough on our behalf to talk to some of those who were involved in and supported the ouster of Speaker McCarthy, Congressman Good and Rosendale. Let's listen to your question and their answers from earlier today.
You voted to oust Kevin McCarthy without a known plan B. Who's plan B?
Well, what we want to have is a contest or a competition for a speaker, not a coronation like we had back in January. Now, it was a prolonged coronation, but he was the only serious challenger or contender because he was the presumptive speaker.
There's a lot of really, really talented individuals that have already raised their hand up, which goes to prove our point that we were making in January. Once the king is removed, we'll find out who else wants to run.
The king? The speaker's not a king? Small point, but it sort of speaks to the larger disconnect between reality and the language of the House of Representatives. Scott, catch our audience also up on some eviction notices that were handed out in the last 24 hours.
Yeah, in the past 24 hours, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and former House Democratic leader Steny Hoyer were evicted from their Capitol hideaway offices just behind me. The private studies that are given off the House floor for senior, high-ranking members of Congress. It happened to their surprise. And according to one of Kevin McCarthy's lieutenants, it was done because former Speaker McCarthy now needs a hideaway office in the Capitol, and he's going to take the one that belonged to Nancy Pelosi. This was done at Speaker McCarthy, former Speaker McCarthy's orders as he exited the position. But something else strikes me, Major. As I follow around through this day, the acting speaker, the Speaker pro tem, Patrick McHenry of North Carolina, a particularly devoted loyalist to Kevin McCarthy. We keep asking him what's next on the schedule, what happens next until there's a speaker. If he doesn't answer the question, there really are no answers. So it's not so much a matter of we don't know what's happening next with the U.S. House. The U.S. House doesn't know what's happening next with the U.S. House.
So, Scott, I want to play from you some sound from the Senate Republican leader, Mitch McConnell, who was regarding this situation askance, to be sure, and also understanding that one of the concessions that Speaker McCarthy made to win the speakership was having a single person being empowered to enter a motion to vacate. Let's hear what Senator McConnell had to say about the future.
I have no advice to give to House Republicans except one. I hope whoever the next speaker is gets rid of the motion to vacate. I think it makes the speaker's job impossible, and the American people expect us to have a functioning government.
Scott, to what degree, as best you can discern it, is that a conversation actively going on among House Republicans, and will they take that advice from the Senate Republican leader?
Now, you better believe there's a conversation as this speaker discussion begins, as these candidates start taking meetings. For example, Steve Scalise met today with the Texas Republicans and with the New York Republicans. This is going to be an issue, according to the rank and file with whom we're speaking, that you may want to change this rule. And this may be something one of the candidates needs to promise to secure the support of the moderates and those who are at this point so frustrated with the 8 GOP defectors who helped vote out Kevin McCarthy. And I'll just add this. Not a day goes by where senators of either party don't seize the opportunity to dunk on the U.S. House whenever they can. But this is real. And I think the senators recognize the threat that is being posed now to the functioning of American democracy and the prospects of avoiding a government shutdown. The instability in the House is a dangerous thing. The senators recognize that, and their criticisms today, at least, are uniquely sober in that this needs to get fixed soon.
Needs to get fixed soon. In that regard, let us listen to Steve Scalise and Jim Jordan. They both offered some sentiments today. We have them in order. Steve Scalise first, then Jim Jordan. Let's take a listen.
Right now, I've been just obviously listening to a lot of members and having a lot of really good conversations about how we keep focusing on the things we need to do to get our country back on track.
We need to pass the bills that need to be passed. We've done a lot of that. The biggest one, of course, is H.R. 2, the Immigration Border Security legislation. Frankly, I wish Chuck Schumer would bring it up.
So, Scott, at one level, those all seem like reasonable people saying reasonable things, but about a totally unreasonable set of circumstances. And as I mentioned in the open to this show, they will be vying against one another, which means they will have to appeal to Republicans to support them over another Republican. Even if others jump into this race, it'll be even more complicated in terms of trying to build a coalition. And as you mentioned in your first answer, there's still no timeline for any of this, correct?
That's right. What's more, they're both facing the same reality Kevin McCarthy faced, that there's going to be a handful of Republicans who love that motion to vacate rule. Look how they employed it this week. Look at the resonance they've received for doing so. Look at the platform they've been given over the past 24 hours to say what they want to say to America. And look how they were able to exact what they wanted to exact through using that tool. They're going to want to keep that tool. Steve Scalise, Jim Jordan, anybody else who jumps into this race is going to have to face that dynamic and cater to those members to win their votes. What happens next is far from certain, and that's true among both parties in the U.S. House. What are Democrats going to do? They're going to vote in unison for Hakeem Jeffries, but are they going to want to get involved with talking to one of these nominees, see if they can get some concessions? Maybe they can try to exert some leverage, but really, this is still an internal Republican battle and one that's going to play out over the next few days.
With deep thanks for your reporting and analysis, as always, Scott MacFarlane. We appreciate you.